Thanks for tuning into today's podcast. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our new remote training here at RPP. We've been offering remote training for quite some time, but we always required the athlete to come in-house for an assessment. Now we can do the whole assessment online and bring all of our services, pitching, hitting, and strength training to your doorstep. So, if you like what we do and how we do it, go to our website at rocklandpeakperformance.com and click on Remote Training in the toolbar. Thanks. The Behind the Scenes podcast. I'm your host, Nunzio Signore, looking to bring you great dialogue with some of the best in the world of player development. The world of training baseball players has changed dramatically during the past few years, and I'm looking forward to shedding some light here on what's the latest, what's the best, and what's really happening in the world of player development. Thanks for joining me for the ride. Hey guys, welcome to the Behind the Scenes podcast. Today we've got Nate Yeskie on, pitching coach for Texas A&M, and I've been waiting to get this guy on. We've been playing phone tag. At Texas A&M most recently advanced to the first ever semifinal appearance of the College World Series. During his nearly 20-year coaching career, Yeskie has established himself as one of the premier pitching coaches in the nation. He has twice earned National Pitching Coach of the Year recognition from Collegiate Baseball and was tabbed the D1 Baseball Assistant Coach of the Year in 2017. He joined the Aggies after 2 seasons at the University of Arizona. Prior to his stint at Arizona, Yeskie coached 11 seasons with Oregon State. From 2009 to 2019, Oregon State earned a spot in the NCAA tournament in 10 of the 11 seasons, highlighted by the national championship run in 2018. Yeskie began his collegiate coaching career at UNLV, his alma mater, from 2005 to 2007, and he was also a 9th-round pick of the Minnesota Twins in 1996, where he played 5 years in their organization, which I actually did not know until I did the research. We'd like to welcome to the show today, Nate Yeskie.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here and looking forward to talking a little baseball.
Yeah, man, can you talk a bit about how you made the transition from ball player to coach?
Yeah, it's funny. People have asked me if I always thought that I would get into coaching at the college level, and I can distinctly remember sitting in the dugout during my college days and thinking, boy, these guys that help us and kind of push us and challenge us each day, they get paid to do this. And I think that in everybody's mind, they have this desire to want to play at the big league level, and they should if that's their path that they choose to pursue. But I was just looking around thinking about, I've always been really intrigued by the team element. I felt like in any sport where you involve multiple players, there has to be a dynamic that's involved. So it was something that always kind of caught my attention, and watching how those bonds were developed. My first couple of years as a player, we didn't do very well in our program. I think we were about a 500 level team. And then my junior year, it all kind of came together, and I was sitting on the sidelines with an injury at the time, and watching how things kind of unfolded and trying to at least be somewhat of the glue that I feel like I was the previous 2 seasons, pitching on Friday nights. And so you take on a different perspective of things, and looking at it at that time, just thinking, man, a chance to be a coach, that would be pretty neat. So when my playing days were done, I was fortunate enough, I was sitting around and one of my old college roommates said, hey, they're making a change down the street. The guy that's in that position is looking to get closer to home, and they're going to need somebody. So I thought I would just throw my name in the ring and see how it unfolded. I thought I never really anticipated getting the job. I thought it was going to be more of a learning process, and okay, now I would know what I need to do and prepare me better for the next time around. And it just so worked that got in there. We got into a regional my first year, won both the conference regular season title and the tournament title. And it was pretty unique building the bonds with a lot of those guys. I still talk to a handful of them to this day, and actually one of them lives next door to one of the players that I'm coaching today. So, going full circle and looking how the whole thing unfolded, I just wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to be a part of baseball. I like the camaraderie. I like having an office outside,
Right.
and just watching kids pursue their goals, chase their dreams, and being able to impact somebody's life on both an athletic as well as an academic level.
So, okay, you're a player and now you're going to be a coach. What are those first thoughts that go through your mind? And what was the first thing that you was such an aha moment between the difference between being a player and being a coach? Like the first time you got it together and you sat down, you said, okay, I'm going to actually do this. Whoa. What was the overwhelming?
Well, it's funny because we have these same types of questions throughout conversations as the years unfold. And I think my perspective was very similar to that of many young coaches. I'm going to fix everybody. We're going to storm the beach.
Yeah.
We're going to get everything dialed in, and here we go. And you see the best in everybody in every scenario. And the game humbles you in a hurry. And it really shows a lot of different layers to it where kids may be dealing with some external elements. Sometimes they're injuries, sometimes there are things away from the field that you have to understand how those things influence and impact a young man when he shows up to the field each day. Well, your head and your focus and your attention may be in one direction. His may be either in a completely different one or not there at all. And so
Right.
as I got older and coaching started understanding that, each young man is on a case by case basis. For people that have 2 or 3 kids at home, they would certainly understand that each one of their children are different. And I don't think it's any different here. And you see a lot of guys that freshmen, they want to have kind of a say. They want to be able to play and have an impact. By year 2, they want to start. By year 3, they want to be an all conference and all America and a high draft pick. And so everybody's kind of dealing with this different dynamic of sorts. And
This timeline.
yeah. And so we try to really emphasize that as you get together in a group, all of those things are certainly able to happen if we keep the focus on the main thing. And whatever that main thing may be for the day or for the week or even for the month, we try not to get too far out ahead of it. Whereas as a young coach, you wanted to. You were already fast forward in your mind into the playoffs and into the season. And now as I've gotten older, I value the fall so much. And I value the time that we have from Christmas on into the opening weekend, because I think that you can really make up a lot of ground in those small pockets of time, just because the kids that are ready to get on board, ready to work for each other, and ready to keep that main thing the focus, then I think that it makes it a little bit easier. So there's always some juggling. There's always going to be some things that are there, whether they're distractions. I've often referenced it as from a coach that I learned, it's like the enemy coming over the hill. You don't know when he's coming. You don't know how many of them are coming, but you know that it's coming, and you got to be prepared for those things as best you can.
I think that's great. I think that an important thing that you said was when you first start, you're ready to storm the beaches right away. You're trying to accomplish everything at one time. And as you get older and you get more experienced, I think a big thing that you said was you learn how to manage your time and actually take your time. I think that any good strength coach, I think you need to understand if a guy's coming in here and wants you to get him ready to go in 6 weeks, I think as a good strength coach, you have to tell the guy, listen, man, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But the one thing we're not going to do is we're not going to rush anything, because it doesn't bide well. And I think that what you're talking about as far as coaching goes, the same thing. And I spoke at Wake Forest this weekend, and I think it was the VP of performance with the LA Dodgers. The first thing he said when he walked up, and he's been in the gig for 15 years, and it was a great presentation. It was Brandon, I think it was McDaniels. And he said, the first thing I want to tell everybody in player development is you got to take your time. So this take your time, this keeps resurfacing throughout my life as a guy that's older and been doing this for a long time. I can appreciate what you're saying. Even the way you speak right now is much different than a lot of people that I interview, in the way you actually take your time. And I think that's just notches in the belt. I just think it comes from experience. And I just think you realize that, being on a hamster wheel is really tiring. So
No doubt.
just kind of
Most
do that. College baseball has changed so much over the past few years. And even though those times have obviously changed, what are some things that pitchers still, and you in your mind, will always have to do to play D1 or higher level baseball?
I think you touched on it just earlier with what you're outlining, patience, understanding that you may not throw 95 next week or even next spring. It's going to take some time to get there. And kind of going back for a second, I mean, there's things that we can always learn. As coaches, we learn from our players every day, and taking your time allows that. So as a player, you're going to be able to have a better understanding of your path when you do take your time and you take your focus in those. And in this day and age where everything's hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. I mean, I've seen young men create Twitter accounts just to announce what school they're committing to. And I've seen guys, well, coach, I'm just wondering, and it's almost like they want to jump at the first offer. And there's not, I think, a lot of depth that goes into those decisions, because you have to recognize, how am I going to interact with those guys? Because there's a lot of elements when you look at college baseball. Sometimes the coaching staffs change. Sometimes the dynamic of the team changes. You might want to go to a certain school, but what's in your best interest is to go somewhere else, because you're going to get the development that you need. You're going to get the opportunities that you need. You're going to get a lot of other things that when you're younger, you're 15, you're 16, 17, you don't have that perspective. You don't have that understanding of those things that you need. So, with college and what pitchers need, I think the mental game is always going to be present. The guys who seem to be most comfortable in the middle of an uncomfortable situation, whether that's pitching on the road in conference play, whether that's playing in a regional or a super regional game 3. And speaking from experience, watching a young man who was a freshman just dazzle and pitch very well in game 3 of the College World Series. I mean, it was everybody's going home after this one, and somebody's going home with a title and somebody's not. That young man really understood that it wasn't so much about him and what he needed to do, as so much it was the trust that he needed to put into his teammates, into himself, and into his work. And watching that evolution from the start of the season to the end. I've got an old presentation that's got his face side by side from his debut as a freshman, and you can see the anxiety and the tension, and he wanted to strike everybody out on the team with the very next pitch. Right. And it's just taking your time to get there, and patience, unfortunately, with the transfer portal. And I think it goes, many different ways, but there's things that players have to understand, that if you got a uniform, you got a chance. There's good players from different programs. And, sometimes a guy who was a junior in high school that might have been a little bit light on velocity, all of a sudden his body starts to develop, his awareness to things, and that work that he put in, they have to have a solid work ethic, and it has to be connected to what the ultimate goal is. Because work for the sake of work, I think you said it best, it's like running around in a hamster wheel. You're just going to get fatigued and you're not going to go anywhere. But how are we doing what we're doing, and how is that going to translate to, okay, I can see more life on the fastball, or I can see better command on the fastball. I see better break and better action on my breaking ball. I can control the running game better, or field my position. They're all elements to becoming what we refer to here is a winning player, a guy who helps you win. And we've got guys that throw 87, 89, and they're winners. We got guys that throw 92, 93, and they're winners. Now, when they struggle, they get outside of who they are. And I think it's being true to yourself and authentic to what you are, because some guys aren't 6'6" and left-handed throwing 95. There aren't many of those guys. So being comfortable with who they are, understanding that process kind of takes some time. And I gave a young man a challenge at one point this fall. I said, hey, I want you to take a look at these specifics with these things. And then when you get a chance, let's come back and we'll put our heads together. But I've talked to our athletic trainer and our strength conditioning coach, and here's kind of my thoughts. A week later, I go down and I see, and he's got all this stuff mapped out. He took the initiative on his own. He realized how it started to unfold and why it wasn't working the way that he did. And luckily, he caught lightning in a bottle with a couple of things, so he recognized it. But I don't think that without his patience and his understanding of the big picture, that he would have been able to really get to that point.
You said something interesting. You said he got outside of himself. And I remember, I think it was Vince Lombardi who said he could tell when his team, if his team was winning and a team started coming back from behind, he could see if his team was going to actually do something about it, or they were going to step outside themselves and be spectators of their demise, right? That's a really deep statement. He said, because once you start stepping outside of yourself and you're watching yourself lose instead of staying inside and trying to prevent the situation from happening, you're done. Right.
There's no doubt. You're speaking my language as a Packers fan. I mean, Vince Lombardi was in my dad and my grandfather's house, and I've seen it on walls and offices. But you're right, and I think that as a coach, you can see things. As a fan, you can see things. But to me, when your team feels it and when the other team feels it, and I think that's what Vince is talking about. You could almost feel those things starting to happen, and then okay, you could recognize it a little bit later, but it's that feel element, and it goes into so many ways, whether there's just this underlying weight that's kind of lifted off your shoulders where you're like, okay, my player's got this thing figured out. Or as a team, you go, we just trust them. They know what to do with the situation. They know how to manage themselves. They know how to do whatever the task may be, whether that's weights in the morning or whether that's a drill at practice or something individually. That feel element is so big. And so when players stay true to who they are and recognize that I just have to do my job, to just do the things that I need to do and do them to the best of my ability, and then show up again and do it tomorrow and do the other things that are relative to helping that performance and help that nurture, then I think that you're looking at when you've got something special.
That's great. Talking on the topic of development, when you make an offer to a sophomore or a freshman high school player, you're basically making an educated bet that not only the young man is going to continue to work hard, but he's also going to continue to improve. It's almost like you have to have a sixth sense about it. How do you make a determination with a younger guy? Like, I'll explain to the listeners, a young man from Pennsylvania named Brett Antolik came to me through Coach Yeskie, had recommended that he come here. And when he got here, he was a 6'2" sophomore, 182 pounds, throwing 86 to 88. And my first initial reaction was like, wow, Texas A&M, 182 pounds, 86 miles an hour. He's now 6'3", 212, and he's sitting 92 to 95. And he's been putting, like you said, he's been putting the work in. But what is it that you saw in someone who may not, we always talk about being projectable. What is it that you did to take a risk on a guy that may not have the metrics right away? And how do you decide when you look at two guys that don't have the metrics, how do you decide which kid, what are some clues that you get that this guy might be a good guy to take a shot on?
Yeah, I think a lot of times when you're making decisions in games, I don't necessarily know that we're looking at metrics. I believe that there are some people that do that, but I need to be able to look into a guy's eyes and see what his soul is telling me. And when you're recruiting kids, you get a sense of kids that want to be a part of what you're doing. They're invested in you, and certainly in Brett's case, we're invested in him and the things that he does. But talking about a kid with great parents, great family, great understanding of the dynamic of things. And this goes so deep because there's kids that not just ourselves, but other organizations will pass on who have talent because they just don't want to deal with the headache of things. And so,
Yeah.
you know, that comes into play. How much do you want to deal with? Because you could be dealing with some things that you really don't want to. But in a lot of players' cases, when they're younger, I look to see how they move. Can we iron out some of the wrinkles in that movement pattern? And do they have the passion and the desire to want to get better? And you know, some guys will have a good arm and you can see some things and you go, okay, but I don't necessarily get caught up in the metrics a whole lot because for us, we're never going to have the finished product. Kids are always going to continue to get better. And by the time they leave us, in some cases, they're 21, 22 years old. They may not hit their peak until 26, 27. So do we have a guy who's involved in our team dynamic, who's going to be invested in doing the things the way that we think are in his best interest? And if those things match and they connect, then I think that's a good foundation to build upon. And you know, good kids from good families that want to work hard, I don't think that you can miss too often on those.
So let's talk about those parents for a sec. Let's talk about them. Like I know coaches generally don't want to communicate with the parents usually, which makes sense. But every child is a product of their parents in one way or another. How and when do you assess the parent's disposition? How does that play into your decision-making process, or does it? Maybe we can help some of these type AAA parents that kind of like maybe thinking that they're looking out for the best interest of their kid. They may actually be shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is, being a parent myself is when to step back. I remember when our daughter was young and she fell down, and I looked at my wife and she wanted to help her up, and I just kind of had to hold her back, like, no, this might be a good moment just to see how she reacts. And our kind of motto at the time with her was, just brush it off. And she gets up and her hands are kind of chewed up from the gravel, and you can see
Yeah.
she's bleeding a little bit, and hey, brush it off. So how they react in those environments that you create, and some of them you can't create, but um, you got to be able to step back. You can't be, you can be their parent all the time, but you can't be their coach, and you can't be their doctor, and you can't be their PT, and you can't be all those things all at once. And so I've been fortunate enough to coach many, many, many good kids from great families. And when you look at that common thread between them, they knew when to be able to take a step back. They brought those kids to your doorstep, and trusting that you're going to do what's best in their time. And it's not always going to be easy. There's going to be some bumpy roads or some high seas, however you tend to look at it. And for those kids, understanding that they've got the support that's there. And I can remember one young man who was having some problems, and his dad had played at a high level, at the highest. And I said, well, what'd your dad have to say? And he said, well, my dad says, I don't know what you're calling and crying to me for. And he hung up on me. And so I laughed at the kid's response. Well, your dad hung up on you? And he says, yeah. He says, you got coaches, go listen to them, go do the things that you need to do. And the reason that you look at this and why this stuff isn't working might be because you're not working, or you're looking for somebody to kind of give you more support to your argument or why you see things the way that you do. So tough love can be a good thing for some of those kids. And certainly when you're able to take a step back and give them that space to grow, I think that you find out some unique things, because coaching is much like parenting, in my opinion, in that you're supposed to make yourself less and less necessary. Not that you're not available. You'll always be there for your kids, whether you're a parent or a coach. But if you have to do every single thing and be there every step of the way with them, then I don't think you've done a very good job at coaching them up from a baseball standpoint, because your job should be to teach them how to do it on their own.
Right. I agree 100%. The differences, if any, that you see between West Coast, Southern Texas prospects and Northeast prospects, the differences that you see when kids show up.
Sure. Sometimes there's going to be a physical difference. Some kids might play 3 sports. They might play football. They might play basketball. Some might play only baseball. So you try to take into account, have they really hit their peak here? Some kids from warm weather climates are very skilled. They can develop that skill set because they have the freedom and flexibility, even in December, January, to be outside and doing some things. But for all the things that you would think would be beneficial from a skill development standpoint, they may not be taking any time off. They may not be given their body time to recover. They may not be doing something else. And some people think, well, it's good to play basketball and it's good to play baseball for the sake of letting your body do something different. I don't disagree with that. But I also think that problem solving comes into play. I got a minute and a half left and I got 2 timeouts and I got to go 70 yards down the field and put my team in field goal position, or score a touchdown to win the game. So kids start learning things a little bit different with regards to problem solving, whether it's your industry, whether it's somebody working in an automotive industry, it's all problem solving. So same with basketball. Kids get the chance to move around, move different directions, run up and down the court, and maybe not beat themselves up necessarily behind home plate, doing blocking drills for 7-8 months out of the year. So when I think you're taking into account where a kid is from, I think you have to look more than just, okay, this kid's from Minnesota, this kid's from Florida, this kid's from Iowa, this kid's from Arizona. they're all going to be a little bit different, and it's the ability to, I think, kind of look at it through their eyes and feel like, all right, do they see this for what it can really become, or are they just hoping to just jump aboard your wagon and go for a ride? Because the kids who know what they want to do and how they want to do it, I think, can articulate it. I think that they can give you some insight into their own perspective, which now brings you closer to their understanding, and that will help you make a decision on your end when you're recruiting. All right, this is a guy that we need. This guy can help us win, but most importantly, we can help him because he understands it.
I tell my daughter all the time. As a matter of fact, she just got accepted into a master's program at George Washington University. And when she said, Dad, they're going to call me on a Zoom interview, one of the things I told her was, I said, make sure that they understand that you understand yourself. That was a really, really, because there's a sense of security that goes there, a confidence there that looks healthy. And insecurity, sometimes, correct me if you disagree, insecurity looks lazy. It kind of looks anticlimactic. It's almost like non-athletic, So I think your thing about, knowing who you are and understanding yourself is a key thing. With the advent of flat ground, let's talk about some key things that you look for in video that is sent to you that maybe helps some future recruits should be aware of. With the advent of flat ground, what are some of these key things you look for in video that is sent to you that young future recruits should be aware of?
Well, can he control his lower half? How well does he rotate? How well does his arm work in sync with, regards to his lower half? Can he keep his head in a good position to throw? A lot of times, if your head's moving all over the place, it's going to be hard to go. I grew up in an era where you'd see guys like Kevin Apier throw and Rob Dibble and guys who maybe weren't mechanically sound, but boy, they could make pitches, and they understood back again to who they were and what they needed to do to get guys out. So I think when the guys are younger, are you looking at a finished product too? Is this guy closer to what he's ultimately going to become? If that's Kerry Wood to some degree, when he's younger, you're looking at a big power right-handed arm who you can still dream on the body a little bit, but boy, the stuff is present. And there's guys at our level that you could say that they're firm. A young kid in high school might want to throw 93 and feel like, man, that's going to be a good fastball. 93 at our level is fairly common for a lot of guys. And just because you throw 93 doesn't mean that you can necessarily power pitch. So, if you're 87,
explain that a little bit.
Well, I think now you're dragging the metrics into it, because you start thinking about, all right, well, this guy can throw. I remember a few years back, we had two young men that were both capable of throwing the ball anywhere from 93 on up to 98, 99 miles an hour. And on one particular day, one young man's throwing 97, 98, and his stuff is getting sent back into center field in a heartbeat. And the other guy's throwing the stuff by guys at 93, 95. The spin, some of the true spin, where the ball was being thrown, the command element, he could power pitch in that range because he could hit the four quadrants with his fastball. He had something soft that made the fastball play up, where the other young man wasn't landing anything soft. Guys are sitting back saying, listen, the ball is just going to be away. Like we can go and we can get this. And I've had many, many experiences over the years looking at a scouting report my first year of coaching going, is this right? Kid looks at it and goes, yeah, no, that's right. I said, this guy's 96, 98, and we're chasing him in the second inning. And the kid's response to me was, well, everything's hard and it's just up in the strike zone. So, and all I got to do is just catch one. Okay. We saw the young man the next year. He was again in the same velocity range, but it was for 9 innings, and he located. He moved the ball in. He moved the ball up in the zone. He threw the ball away. So, that was the true sense of pitching, and he had something soft to make the fastball even better, so that he could power pitch. So, I think when you're looking at young guys, again, back to your question is, can they move the ball around? And in a big one nowadays, because everybody wants to miss bats, can you induce soft contact? There's an art and an element to pitching And this is why there's guys where, well, how did you guys see that? How did you guys know? We had a kid at a couple stops ago that was a closer for us at 84, 87 that was left-handed, that knew how to induce soft contact. And if the elements of the field were playing a certain way, sometimes where the runners are, you might want the ball put in play to a certain part of the field just to not allow a runner to advance. He would allow you to navigate that in that fashion because he could execute those pitches. So pitch execution is big because I think people in your industry are able to speed up that curve for kids to get stronger, make some jumps with their stuff. But if kids can pitch, and the one that nobody's been able to really figure out just yet is the element of deception, that if a guy's got some deception to him, you scratch your head and you walk away and you go, okay. I mean, it's the best piece of advice I ever got from a particular scout who I've known for years. He said, you got to see this guy. Show up and see him, and he strikes out 14, but boy, is it light. It's 82, 84. So we'll come back and see him again maybe in a few weeks. Come back and see him, same deal. Strikes out 14 or 15, it's 82, 84. Still can't get on board with it. Just can't get over the hump. Says, listen, he's going to throw again in about 3 weeks. Come back, see him one more time. Don't bring your radar gun. I don't bring it. I sit and I watch him a little bit more, and I go over by the dugout and I'm listening to some of the things that the other team has to say. And guy strikes out 15. He loses on a pitch that probably shouldn't have been thrown in the first place. But I'd laugh about it thinking to this day because it really opened my eyes to some of those other things. Well, fast forward, the young man was in AAA this year going 92, 95 with the deception that he had. And, there's same things are being said. I've talked to guys at both the last school that I worked at, now this one that I played against him. And I said, what do you got on this guy? And I said, Coach, you can't pick the ball up on that guy. He is a miserable at bat. So the deception piece is why when we recruit kids, talking to them is one thing. You can see something that video sends, but you got to be able to go watch them play, see how they respond in their environment, and see what the hitter tells you.
So talking about pitch selection and deception and spin, which pieces of the technology puzzle, if any, do you utilize when training your pitchers and recruiting your guys? Do you ask for anything from them in the tech side, or do you wait till they get there? And if you do, what are some of the things you utilize when training your pitchers?
Yeah, I think, if they have access to it or we have the availability to take a peek at it, it gives us some insight and some direction with some things that maybe the naked eye wouldn't be able to tell us. I think the longer we do this, the more that you can say, no, that guy probably spins it pretty good. Well, why? He keeps pitching in the top of the strike zone and guys keep swinging underneath it and swinging through it. Okay. And then you might get TrackMan and it'll tell you, no, you're right, or Rapsodo. If we get access to those things, great. We do utilize those things at our facility, and we've got, I think, camera. And I just think that players, when we have guys stand in and they're able to communicate and connect the things that they do when standing in on a bullpen or scrimmages, hey, what do you got on this guy? We've got a young man this year who's a freshman who can do some unique things with his fastball that some of our older guys are coming back going, I don't understand this. We had another young man last year who had he's got 2 different types of breaking balls, but one of them really kind of stands out differently. And we kept looking and we kept looking and we kept looking until finally we found something in there that gave us some rationale as to why he probably has success with that pitch, even though metrically it may look very similar to his other breaking ball. There's some qualities to it that make it different and make it unique. So we'll use it, and then we try to use it as a guide. If we're getting too far off of that pace, I think the radar gun's an easy one because it's in a lot of stadiums. Hey, this guy's normally 90, 95. That last pitch was 87. Okay, yes, he's tired.
Right.
Whether it be Kinetrax or some of these other ones that are in major league stadiums. I think we're still learning. I don't know that there's been a bridge that's built completely between where a player is and where he wants to go, that is going to take itself solely through the use of technology. And that's why you got to put in the work. You got to have some feel, and you got to be able to, as a player, I think, absorb it and then articulate it with the group that's helping you. And then it's all trial and error. it continues to be a sample process throughout, because each kid and how they navigate an at bat and how they even navigate their own body in the off season, it's a puzzle, and you're just trying to continue to either piece it together or even unlock it in some cases.
Awesome. Talk to me about the transfer portal as it relates to recruiting, some positive and some negatives that you see from this craziness that's going on.
Yeah, I think the positives are that, sometimes kids are jumping into something that they think is going to be like, all right, this is really what I was hoping for. And then unfortunately they get there and it might be a little bit different than they'd anticipated. And it goes both ways. Some kids, their ability level is better than maybe the place that they're at, and they need to be challenged more. And for some kids, they might have been in over their head. It might have been something that you were hoping was going to take. Maybe there was an injury and a setback that didn't allow the kid to really have the type of spring that he needed to his senior year, coming off, say, a football or a basketball injury. So it does provide people an opportunity for a second chance, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
The negative side of it, I think, is that somebody's always trying to sell something. And not that it happens everywhere, but I do think that there are instances where somebody's looking for a better deal. Somebody's looking for a guarantee. Somebody's looking for something that they feel like they aren't getting at their other institution, when sometimes the only thing you need to do is look in the mirror and ask yourself, am I doing everything that I need to? And if the answer is yes, and things aren't working out, well, then yeah, maybe there's a change in there. But I think, unfortunately, in sports and at times, relative to whatever the sport is, people are looking for this magic button or this magic pill that's going to be like the aha moment. I got it. There
Right.
it is.
Yeah.
The journey's never over. You're always working towards something. And whether or not if you get to the top of one mountain, well, then you want to climb another one. So it shouldn't be that you're meant to stay there and check it out. If you climb Everest, all right, I'm up there, but now you got to get yourself back down. And once you get to the bottom, you go, all right, what's the next one?
Yeah, what's next? I always like to ask guys that I respect some reading, that aspiring coaches, or just any great reading that people could get their hands on that you've read, any books that you highly suggest.
Yeah, for the time element, I usually get more into articles, because I can delve a little bit deeper into there, and whether they be things that yourself or people in your industry put out, those things are great for me. I think when you go through and you have to kind of find what identifies with you first, and I think that's going to allow you to branch out. I've got books at my office that have got Navy SEAL books. Used to have some Navy SEALs come in and work with our teams, and those guys were great. They offered some perspective. There's business books that talk about structure and talk about how you want to really kind of lay out your time and your attention to detail with certain items. Those can be beneficial. And then certainly I think there's motivational ones. I think we all need to be motivated. Everybody to just be intrinsically motivated and be able to go. I think that's part of what coaching is being able to help motivate guys. Now, you're going to be able to do it every day? No. So you can't operate at a level 10 each day, but it gives guys perspective for guys that, whether or not they want to see those things. So whether it's a book on the All Blacks, a book on, the rugby and the Australian rules football and things like that, those things are great. But also when you look at some of the others where, like I said, it might be a business book, or it might be something else where you get inspired by something. I know Miracle is a movie that I enjoy watching a lot of times, where you get guys from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different programs, and all right, we got to work for the same thing. So that one wasn't a book, but that was a movie that I've always enjoyed as well. I'm
curious, what did the SEALs work with you guys on?
Understanding. I think that a lot of times that it's never going to be right. As an athlete, we're always choosing, I think when we're younger, we're chasing perfection. And you might hit a moment here or there where like that pitch was just ideal. But sometimes the imperfection allows for you to achieve your goals. I'll watch a guy throw a bullpen and he'll miss a spot and feel like, man, you get frustrated and say, well, why are you frustrated? That's an elevated fastball. I know you're trying to go glove side down, but if you got to hit that pitch at a time in game, why don't you learn and take into account what you did that made that happen, so that now we've got that shot in our bag. Same thing, the guy bounces a breaking ball and he might be frustrated because, all right, I'm trying to throw it for strikes. Well, don't forget that the reason you might be throwing a breaking ball 0-0 to that hitter is because he likes to jump fastballs. You've got a little deception, so now all of a sudden he swings and misses at it. You didn't have to necessarily throw it for a strike in that count, or that's the one you want to throw for 2 strikes. So when you look at how all those things go, I think that the SEALs gave us a lot of insight with regards to it's never going to be perfect. Their motto, the only easy day was yesterday. So they're always continuing to look to challenge themselves, and just the cohesiveness. They really helped us identify who your leaders were. You'd be surprised at somebody else's perspective based on the environment that they're in with. And I know you guys might think this guy is best suited for this, but this is the guy that you guys might want to give some more ownership to and see what happens. And so that perspective is always valuable.
Great. That's great advice. Sum it up for us, Coach. Give it to me straight. I'm a sophomore pitcher in high school looking to play for you at Texas A&M. What do you want to see in me as a pitcher to consider me as a real prospect for your program?
Well, I mean, if I'm going to come watch you play, I want to see how you play catch. I want to see how you go about your business. Do you take ownership of your routine? Are you a good teammate? When you're not pitching or when things aren't going your way, how do you handle success? How do you handle failure? Because as a player, I think you're going to have to deal with both of those ends of the spectrum. And then let's say you're pulled out of the game. How are you going to continue to pull for your teammates when you're not in the mix? We had a young man last year trying to finish game 3 of a super. We pulled him out. He gave up a base hit to the first guy in the 9th, 3-2 on the next guy, and we took him out of the game. And he was visibly frustrated because he wanted to do well. He wanted to do what he needed to do for his teammates. But I saw the video and we used it as a learning tool, and we've got some photos that were taken. Look at your face now 5 minutes later. You're excited because we won. So I think when players understand that what they're doing and their focus can go towards how can I help my team, that goes a long ways with me, as opposed to, did I do well? Did I get mine? Did I perform today? And all right, well, maybe you didn't perform, but we learned some things about yourself that if applied correctly, you can really benefit from the next time out and certainly for the rest of the season.
Awesome. This has been awesome. We've been talking with Coach Nate Yeskie from Texas A&M. Coach, I want to thank you for being on. Is there any way that guys can reach you on social media?
Yeah, I've just, my name, my Twitter handle, I think is probably the best way if somebody wants to try to reach out. Certainly they got emails nowadays too. But yeah, social media has become, I think, a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, I agree.
You can really get caught down a rabbit hole looking at a lot of things and comparing yourselves to player. And that's the thing I would say to any player that's listening is like, don't worry about comparing yourself to somebody else. Compare yourself to how good you can be at that particular day, and then set some attainable goals. And then when you get close to those, start focusing on some new ones. You'll get to a point where you'll start making a lot more ground that way, as opposed to, well, if I'm a freshman or a sophomore and I'm comparing myself to the senior who's going to maybe be a draft prospect, those are apples and oranges. They're not the same thing. So do the best you can with what you have and do it together, because you're not going to do this thing alone. You're going to need a lot of help along the way, and that's okay. It's going to make it worth it.
That's awesome. I think that kids do get caught up in the highlight reel of those social media posts. I mean, nobody ever posts anything that seems to be going bad. It's just like kids just see all good all the time. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, you've never seen somebody post a bad outing on Twitter.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
There's social media out there. It's man, I got rocked today.
and kids just spend the whole time looking at that. You guys can reach me on Twitter at Nunzio Signore. My facility on Twitter and Instagram is at RPP_baseball. The website of my facility is www.rocklandpeakperformance.com. And I have a book out on bar speeds and velocity-based training, how to apply science, technology, and data to maximize performance. It's published through Human Kinetics, and you can also get it on Amazon. Coach, I want to thank you one more time. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. And it's actually been a very focused and relaxing conversation, which I really think goes back to that taking your time. Thanks for being on.
No, thanks for having me, Nunzio. I appreciate it.
And we'll see you next week on the Behind the Seams podcast. Thanks.